I'm Catherine Sheeran, host of the podcast Horse Tales with Cat. Our guest today originally hails from Glenville, California, but now makes his home in Ocala, Florida. With over 100 Grand Prix wins in the US and 15 FEI Jumping World Cup finals, 10 of them back-to-back from 2002 to 2012, Richard Spooner is a force to be reckoned with. He is a three-time winner of the American Grand Prix Association Rider of the Year and has amassed more than $5 million in career earnings. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Catherine. Nice to be here.
I usually like to start with where you came from as far as your riding, but I would also be remiss if I didn't touch on, I know you're from California. I know these fires have been going on, and I imagine it has touched your family in some way or other. So I thought I should ask a little bit about what's been going on back home.
Well, the fires are dreadful. And as a Californian, you kind of get used to them as a Floridian would be used to a hurricane. It's always tragic when it happens. And it's just one of those things that we kind of learn to live with, like earthquakes. But that being said, there's a lot of people that are living through a lot of tragedy and loss. Some of them are my friends, and I feel bad for them. And it's a horrible thing to have happen. It's a dry area. I was a bit surprised to see it happening in January. That seemed quite abnormal to me. And it was happening in the areas that it happened. Normally it happened. I lived in the high desert when I was there. And so we had fires consistently. We had to evacuate the farm once, and we had fires kind of all around us. One year they'd come from the south, and one from the north, and one from the east, and one from the west. And then finally, after they had all kind of burnt all of the trees around us, then we felt safe because there was no more fuel for the fires. So you kind of get used to it. It's a part of living out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I would like to start with, when did you start riding and how did it all come about and what was your journey like?
I started riding purely by accident. I grew up in Orange County. I played football, baseball when I was a young lad, tennis. My family was actually more interested in tennis. My father and my brother were tennis players, the youngest of two sons. Then I had a relative come out from Minnesota and wanted to take a riding lesson. I was about 10 years old, and I begrudgingly went and waited in the back of the car for about 45 minutes. But as things go in the horse world, it got quite boring. So I finally got out of the car and just started wandering around the facility, started petting the horses, and that was it. Then I just wanted to go the next day. I asked my mother if I could when she took her lesson, and my mom said, well, only if you take a lesson. And I said, well, I have no interest in doing that. I just want to pet the horses. I don't want to ride. That's not my thing. She said, well, if you're going to come, you need to take a lesson. I said, well, if I have to take a lesson, I want to ride Western because those pants are funny looking and I don't want to be funny looking. So I don't mind being a cowboy, but I don't want to wear those funny pants. And she said, well, it just so happens we only have an English saddle. If you're going to come ride, you're going to need to ride in an English saddle and just have to get used to wearing the clothes and eventually you'll get used to it. And she was right. It took me 20 years, but I got used to them. So one thing led to another. I just wanted to be around the horses. I wasn't really interested in riding all that much. I was quite dismal. When they had the Christmas party after about, I don't know, a year of riding, all of the different riders got different little trophies. One got the strongest legs, one got the best hands, one got the best upper body, and I got the most persistent. So that's because I fell off on the lunge line. I was on the lunge line all year. I mean, I was quite pathetic. But then they conned me into going to a horse show. They said, oh, there's a horse show across the street and we'll go and they have a lead line. I said, well, what's a lead line? Oh, don't worry about it. We're just going to take you over and we're going to get you all dressed up and we're going to take you on your horse and you're going to do the lead line. Well, I didn't really understand what it was. And I went over there and I'm waiting for the lead line and I'm already a 10-year-old boy riding a horse and surrounded by adorable little girls with pigtails and ponies, 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. And I was so embarrassed that I had to go in there looking like it was like Gulliver's Travels. So I went in and I didn't even win. I was second back then in the lead line. It was the early 80s. So they still placed it properly. One person won and then actually everybody else was second. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to have to get good at this if I'm going to keep doing it, because that was dreadfully embarrassing.
Interesting.
So I started riding seriously. Then I decided, okay, I need to pay attention. And I started riding as often as I could. And my parents were kind enough. They bought me a horse. At first, my mom and I shared a horse, but ultimately she gave it to me. Its show name was Two Timer.
Mm.
And so my mom turned over the reins and let me start riding a few times a week. And I gradually got better. And, kind of one thing led to another. I started getting better and better trainers, and my parents bought me better equitation horses. I never rode a jumper until I
Mm.
was 19.
Okay.
Okay, that's not 100% true. I had one season I rode at Santa Barbara National. I rode in a couple of jumper classes, and fell off in the mud, but that's another story. So went on to gradually get more serious about the sport, and ultimately went through some top equitation trainers. Jamie Mann was a huge influence on my riding as a young rider, and I rode a little bit of dressage with Sidley Payne. She was a huge influence. There were other very large influences, and then finished up my equitation years. I got a job working for George as a working student, George Morris. That didn't work out. The best part of working for George was when I met Ian Miller.
Mm.
And so shortly after that is, I think, maybe going to lead into your next question. So I went to work for Ian in, I think it was 89. So I went to work for Ian in Perth. And actually, the first week I worked for Ian was in Tampa when he won the World Cup finals. And so it was, needless to say, an amazing first week.
I bet. Do you remember who he was riding? I was who his
Big Ben,
mount.
he was riding
Oh, it
Big
was
Ben.
Big Ben. Oh, wow, that's fascinating. You were going to lead me to I had an Ottawa connection, and I do remember back in the late 70s, early 80s that you were in the Ottawa area. So you went to Ian Miller's farm, not to Dwyer Hill.
I went to work for Ian and then worked at the Merkleys because Jeff
Hmm.
Camp had worked for the Merkleys first, and he had worked for Ian. And Mr. Merkley owned part of Big Ben, a significant part. And so Ian asked me if I would go and work at Ridgeview. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very pretty little farm, and it was about 45 minutes away from Ian's farm. So I would do both. I would work there and then commute to work with Ian. So I would do about 4 hours at one facility and then 4 hours at the next facility, which obviously was a bit unrealistic and probably unsustainable, even though I was young and foolish. I learned a lot. Obviously, working for Ian was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of the greatest horsemen I've ever known. And he really changed my riding, changed my career. And even after I wasn't working for Ian at the horse shows, he was always amazingly supportive. He would help me and give me advice. And he's really a wonderful mentor.
Well, you've touched on a few things I wanted to ask you about. I even wanted to go back to your early years when you said really it was just you felt like you weren't particularly talented, but you had this love for the horses. So I would imagine that has shaped your ride because I always feel like riders that have that connection with their animal, they just ride a little bit differently and they think about the horse a little bit differently. That would also, I would imagine, so have led you to Ian because I do know like he's a bit of a horse whisperer and that he can get into the head of each of his horses. So do you feel like that would be one of the reasons that you were such a good partnership with him as far as learning?
I would say the level of experience that Ian has had and has obviously in the sport is something that I was lacking.
Hmm.
I was just 18 years old and really had no idea how to ride a jumper. And I had only done the equitation, and I was pretty good at that, but still lacked all experience when it came to how to ride a jumping horse. And Ian was really my first sortie into that kind of the advanced jumper world. I didn't even know really that you could make a living doing this. And I learned not just about horses, but I learned about syndications and watching him manage his business and how he got groups of people together to buy his horses really helped my career because it gave me a bit of a looking glass into, okay, that is a way. For a young rider, it's very difficult to know, how am I going to raise money? How am I going to entice people to support me?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to be able to get one of these wonderful horses so that I can be successful in the sport?
Mm-hmm.
And in my tenure with Ian, I was able to kind of examine his business model, and I utilized his model for my business later on.
I love that. Particularly because I was reading about your horse, Cristallo, who I know you sadly had to put down, I believe it was last fall. And I thought it was interesting because you had him a very long time. And I understand that you had a syndicate that owned that horse. Did you not? That is a bit of a gift in the riding world nowadays because it seems like a lot of people don't get to hold on to their horses for that long when they're at your level in the sport. So I would have to imagine that you have attracted a group of people that really believe in your gifts and must also think a little bit the same way you do, that not only do they syndicate a horse with you, but they also keep it with you for the long haul. They're not trying to sell it for a bigger dollar. How would you
I
say that that has happened?
I would say that the vast majority of syndications start out off with the intent of making money, but I was always very straightforward with the people that I was trying to entice into the syndication. I never used the I word. I never said investment.
Hmm.
My intent was that we all love horses and we love the sport. And the sport's far more interesting when you have a dog in the fight.
Hmm.
So this gives us an opportunity to all pool our resources and buy a horse of higher quality than we would be able to individually. And the maintenance is far less expensive. Oh, it's just as expensive, but proportionately
Hmm.
it's less expensive. And that we're doing this in order to have a top Grand Prix horse if we get so lucky. And the intent is not to sell best car.
Hmm.
You don't trade your Kobe Bryant, you don't trade your best player. And although this is their adventure as well, this is my adventure. They're buying into trying to help me
Oh, I love that.
and make me successful in the sport, and they're part of that success. A lot of people weren't interested. More weren't interested than were. But I felt as though I had to be true to my goals and to myself. And as long as everyone's ideas are going in the same direction, as long as everyone intends on this venture looking in the same way, then you won't have people that are dissatisfied. And that's important to me. I didn't want to misconfuse people. I didn't
Hmm.
want them to think that this was an investment because I've never really seen buying a horse as an investment. Most of the people in this industry that are buying horses obviously are successful in something that they do in
Hmm.
the real world. I always felt as though, look, if you want to make an investment, this is not your world. You should make an investment in your world, and then this is the money that you spend that you want to enjoy on the side. But if you're looking to make an investment, this is not the tree you should be barking up. This is a tree that you're supposed to have fun. This is supposed to just climb the tree. Let's have fun climbing the tree. But you're not going to make money doing this. And so I think that I've attracted the right people along the line. It's not that I don't sell horses, but I sell certain horses.
Right.
And a horse like Cristallo and a horse like Robinson and a few others in my career, they've meant so much to me and to the owners. I'm lucky enough to be able to take care of them.
Hmm. And I was curious, where do most of your horses come from? Because I thought I read somewhere that you do try to buy American bred when possible. What does that look like?
Well, I have no prejudice. If a good horse is a good horse. Robinson, I stumbled upon. Meredith Beerbaum was Meredith
Mm.
Michaels at the time. She and I grew up together. She and I are the same age.
Mm.
And she grew up in California. And I used to, well, I'd like to say I competed against her, but really I just competed with her. because I didn't compete against her. She was way better than I was. I was at the same horse show as she was, but we were friends. And so she and Marcus were dating at the time, and they started a business together in Germany, in Balva. It was kind of her first trip to Germany, her first time in Germany. And she had sold a horse named Alvaredo to Margie Goldstein,
Mm.
which ended up being one of Margie's best horses of all time. And then they called me and said, okay, we have a horse for you. And I said, well, that's great. I don't have any money, but I'll be there. I'll be right there. So off I went to Germany, and they had a different horse in mind. And I saw Robinson in the stall. He wasn't actually for sale, but I had this strange feeling about the horse. So by hook or by crook, I got Robinson bought, even though he wasn't for sale. So I don't really have. And then Cristallo later on, Cristallo was in California. Bob McDonald, who's Debbie McDonald's husband, came to me and said, I have your next Robinson. And I
Mm.
said, I'm not interested. He brought this horse out. He was this runt, tiny, and absolutely insane, 4 years old, unbroke. And I said, yeah, I'm not interested. That's not what I'm looking to do. And then months later, he said, okay, I know you don't want to buy this horse, but do me a favor, just ride him, because I think if you ride him, someone else will buy him. If you try him, someone else will buy him. So I did. After I tried him, I felt like, oh my God, I have to have this horse. So I don't really have a system for
Hmm.
buying horses. If they're in Europe, that's great. The stallion that I have, Halcon, kind of came to me accidentally.
And I just have to interject, my trainer is obsessed with Helcon.
He's amazing. He's amazing. It was during COVID, and I just got a video on the phone from friends of mine that were lived in California, but then moved to Argentina. Erica and Santiago Ricard, and they said, "This is this 4-year-old. It's never shown." They sent me a video of it at home. It was absolutely amazing. But I really wasn't in the market, so I sent the video on to Molly Orstrom, who had owned horses with me in the past, even though at that time she didn't. And I just wrote, I sent her the video and I said, normally when you see a horse you like, oh, please, we have to have this horse, blah, 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 blah. But I just said, do you want it? That was it. He sent the video. Do you want it? Got back, yes. And so we bought it. She bought it. Um, so there's no I guess I'm saying that it kind of happens accidentally.
Hmm. It
I
sounds
always
like you
have
did.
my eyes open, but it happens accidentally. I don't have one person that I go shop with. That probably works for most people, but that doesn't really work for me. I have to they have to kind of
Speak to you.
speak to me. They have to kind of call to me, and it's kind of strangely has to be an accident.
No,
The other
I
horse that I have now, the Legionnaire horse, I went to Europe not to look at for that horse. And then while I was there, I looked at him for a client who was not interested. So Tracy Essie, who uh, owned is my partner, owned Cristallo, part of Cristallo, Robinson. I sent her the video and she said, okay, let's go ahead and do it. So that was a little bit of an accident as well. But I've been lucky. I have had people like Tracy who are there to support me when I get in an accident.
Mhm. Well, I just love that it sounds like you don't have particularly a type, but you have to have that connection. And I would say that that is something that Ian always talked about, that you could get on the nicest horse in the world and it could feel great as you were going around, but if you didn't have a heart connection with it, it wasn't the horse for you. So it sounds like you had that from a very early age. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say for sure it's a, a lot of the success that a rider and a horse combination have derives from the belief in each other.
Mm-hmm.
The rider's belief in the horse and ultimately the horse's belief in the rider. And if you don't in your heart believe that that horse can and is going to make it to be its best, whatever its best is going to be, to be its best, then you shouldn't be riding that horse. There's someone else out there that might feel that way. The horse deserves that opportunity. I worked for Gabby Salik's father, Dr. Salik, at Sandstone when I was young, and there was a horse there that was, well, in my opinion, was dreadful. It was dreadful. And I said to him, we gotta sell this horse. It's dreadful. He said, well, okay, we can sell the horse, but you're not going to ride it anymore. Well, I'm not saying I'm not willing to ride it. Of course, it's my job. I'm going to ride it, and we'll make the best of it, and we'll get him sold. And he said, no, 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 no. If you don't like a horse, then you don't need to ride it, because you're never going to turn that horse into a good horse. No matter how bad you would like to, if you don't like that horse, there's no reason you should ride it. So that was it. So he took me off the horse, and he taught me a valuable lesson. And it was a simple one. And that is, passionate about a horse. It doesn't matter, like Ian was saying, it doesn't matter really what their pedigree is. It could be maybe potentially one of the best horses in the world. But if you don't believe in it, then you should hand it over to someone else.
I think that's a really valid lesson.
I thought it was. It was a hard lesson to learn, because when you're young, you just feel like, well, I should be able to ride everything, and I should make everything work, and it's my job, and it doesn't matter that I don't like the horse. Come hell or high water, this is gonna work out. But ultimately, I've never done myself a favor when I've done that.
And so, who would you say has influenced you the most in terms of your riding and the care of the horse?
I'd say it's multiple people. I couldn't really say that it was one person, because there's a there's a lot of different, we're all made up of a lot of different parts. Um, I would say my basic position, Jamie Mann, really gave me my basic position. When I was young, I was young, and my parents were paying for Jamie to train me. And I had one equitation horse. That's what we could afford to do. And Jamie would spend just countless hours and passionate hours trying to teach me. And as I said before, I wasn't God's gift to horses. I was a bit rigid and behind. And she really took her time and was so passionate about trying to turn me into a good rider. So passionate, in fact, that made me almost angry, dislike her, because there was so much emotion.
I was going to say, and I imagine it made you feel like you couldn't ever be enough on a certain level.
Yeah, I could never be good enough. But then in hindsight, looking back as I matured and got older, then I started to realize how the gift that she gave me. And I think that young riders miss that, just as I did, that although your trainer is not perfect, no one's perfect. She was out there, whether I liked it or not, 6 o'clock in the morning, giving me flat lessons without my stirrups and really torturing me. To try to make me a better rider. And I just thought she was torturing me because she liked to torture people. I didn't know that she was torturing me because she knew that this is what it took for me to become a good rider. The fact that she put that much energy into my riding, she didn't have to. And I think that's what, as a young rider, you don't really understand, because how could you, I guess? You think that that's just, it's kind of the thing you take for granted, just like your parents' love. Assume that you're paying them, but they don't, you don't understand as a kid, they don't have to be passionate about it. They can just be out there kind of telling you, keep your heels down, close your fingers, keep your eyes up, and let's call it a day. And she didn't do that. So she really did me a favor. And then, of course, Ian was absolutely amazing. because I learned about Ian is like a doctor or a scientist, or maybe a combination of the two. He taught me about system, having a system, having a program, having a process. And then the horses have an opportunity to develop in a structured program. And it's a step-by-step process. It's not all about what you feel you should do. It's about a step-by-step process. These horses have to learn. They have to learn in this way. This is first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. Everything with Ian was very well structured.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked with Hugo Simon for years. And I would say that Hugo taught me about thinking outside of the box and taught me advanced principles of horsemanship and really taught me how to communicate and train horses on the flat and really be competitive. Hugo taught me how to be competitive. Because I've never met anyone as competitive as that man. So Hugo really taught me how to be competitive. So I would say those, other than my family and my wife, those have been probably in the sport my three biggest influences.
And it sounds like Hugo is the reason you ended up getting coined the master of faster. Because I would say that it is fun to watch you because you are very efficient and it looks quite effortless. It isn't, we all know. But I would imagine, obviously, the basics that you learned from equitating years ago have stood you well, but it also looks almost, I don't know how your brain works, but it does look like you are very analytical and efficient when you are riding these horses around these big courses. Am I correct in that? Is your brain processing that fast?
Yeah, I mean, there's a system for speed. There's certainly a system for speed. And working with Ian and Hugo, two of the fastest riders ever, you watch the corners that they can cut and the things that they can do, the turns that they can make, and you learn. And if you don't see it being done, I wouldn't say it's a regret, but there was one thing unfortunate about the time that I spent with Ian was I was so young. I was 18, 19 years old. And when you're that old, you don't know what you need to know.
Mm. Hmm.
You're there with one of the greats of the sport, and you're trying to learn, but really you don't know what you need to learn. And I wish that what do they say? Youth is wasted on the young or something like that, right?
I know.
I just wish that I had had a little more life experience when I was working for Ian, to kind of learn even more from him.
Hmm.
But I learned a lot from Ian. And then I think I was maybe ready to learn more because of my experience
Mm.
with Ian. I was ready to learn not more, but different things from Hugo, a little more practical things. And then when I started showing, of course, the best way to learn is to lose. And I did a lot of that. And so I would study. I remember the first time I went to Europe on a developing rider tour. I went to a horse show called Geesteren, which was a 4-star show. And that was my first show ever in Europe. And I took a horse named Kirk and I took Robinson. And I went in a meter 45 speed class with Kirk, who was a thoroughbred, an American horse, owned by Dave and Tracy Kenley. And he was my first Grand Prix horse. He was the first horse I'd ever won a Grand Prix on. And he was quite fast. And I went in my first meter 45 speed class and I had a wonderful round. I was so excited. There was 120 or some ridiculous amount in the class. I went in the top 15 or 20. And when I left, I was in the top group, maybe second or third or something. And then I went back and took the horse back. And about the time I got back up, got the horse organized, got back to the ring, maybe another 30 had gone. By the time I got back to the ring, I was in like 6th place. And I thought, whoa, 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 whoa. What is going on here? And luckily for me, Michael Whitaker came in the ring about the time I came back. And I watched Michael turn into a combination, not even really a stride away, but roll back into a combination, jump A on an angle, bend in the one stride, and jump B on the opposing angle, and he was off, and he didn't really even look up in order to do it. He just looked at the dirt and then turned, boom. I mean, it was so slick and so fast that I realized, okay, adapt or die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I saw that, I said, okay, that is something I have to know. If I don't know that, then what am I doing? If I can't learn how to do that, then I'm just constantly going to be destroyed. I'm going to constantly be 14th place.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing happened later when I watched Marcus Enning. I saw him in Frankfurt International Horse Show, and there was a jump off. I wasn't competing; I was there visiting Hugo, and there was a jump across the middle, and then you had to kind of turn inside another jump to a jump that was on the same line, just a rollback turn, but inside, very tight inside turn. And he did it just with such grace. It was like poetry in motion, just 6 strides, dead, never pulled on the outside rein, never got rough, just stayed inside. The horse bent around his inside leg, didn't spook at the jump in the way, did 6 strides just with such grace. And I saw that and I thought, okay, that's another thing. If I don't know how to do that, if I can't figure out how to do that, then forget it. So when you watch other riders at the top level in the warm up and at the horse show in the ring, what's important is to see the things that you can't do, that you need to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the beauty of showing against the top riders in the world. You're getting to watching Michael do that and watching Marcus Enning do that is like getting to watch Picasso paint.
Mm-hmm.
These are artists, and to get to watch them perform there in front of you and to see their brushstrokes, and then you get to go home and try to practice. That's really the point of going, well, for me anyways, that was the beauty of going to those international shows. I never thought that I was going to ever get to go and compete at those shows
Mm-hmm.
because I was wanting an experience and in talent. So to get to go and compete against those people really was a dream of mine, and I got lucky that I had sponsors and got nice horses and have been able to do that.
Well, it sounds like you're a student of the sport. And I feel like most gifted riders are. They continue their learning journey. It seems like forever, that there's no end to it. And I did want to just touch on, yes, we talked a little bit about Cristallo, but I wanted to hear about, I know it changed your and your wife's life because you uprooted your lives and went from California to France, I believe,
That's correct.
just
Yes.
to have the opportunity for the horse to show there. How did that decision happen? And I guess it opened up all your dreams at once.
It's a combination of ignorance and audacity. In the beginning, when I had Robinson, I had done some European tours and loved it, just especially then, but I think still today. It's the core of the sport. It's the mothership.
Mm,
And to get to ride against those riders was, again, as I said before, was always a dream of mine. So I wanted to do anything in my power to continue my journey. And I did it quite a bit with Robinson, at least enough to get my feet wet. Then when Cristallo came along, horse as magical as Robinson was, I knew that with Cristallo there was, I mean, he was maybe better and different, but maybe better, a little scopier, but also far more difficult. But he was such an exceptional horse that it became apparent that he was too big for the size, the body of water that we were in. He was too big for the body of water that we were in. And so it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to get a horse that at one point ended up being the best horse in the world.
Wow.
So to get a horse at the level is one of the best horses in the world. I knew that he was a type of horse that I couldn't confine to quarters. I couldn't just leave as a regional horse or even a national horse, that he had to be an international horse. And everything came together because I also got lucky that the global tour was starting at the same time, Jan Tops's global tour. And it was a great opportunity because between the global tour and the Nations Cups, it was very inexpensive for Cristallo to show, and he had huge potential to win a lot of money, and he did. So for logistical purposes, we bought lorries and farms and houses, and that Cristallo was the most amazing horse. You could sit down in December at the end of the year. You could look at the FEI calendar. You would just start with, back then there was less five-star shows, but you would just look at the list of five-star shows and you would just circle the ones you wanted to go to. And that would be your calendar for the year. And that horse never took a lame step until the day he retired. He missed one class in his career, and his career was 15 years long.
That's incredible.
So after you've had a horse like that, everything else kind of pales in comparison. In hindsight, when you think about the idea of uprooting your entire family and buying places in Europe, very expensive infrastructure, so that you
Hmm.
can compete basically one horse. There were other horses that were with him, but one heavy hitter is kind of crazy. With that horse, he was so solid that he just you just felt like, yeah, he's going to keep going and he's going to keep winning, and he's just that good. And he was just that good. He was an amazing animal.
Well, I would have to say I'm struck by your fearlessness on a certain level. You're just trusting in your heart that you're going down the right path, and it seems to have served you well in what you've done and accomplished.
I felt as though with my career, it's not called a career, with my voyage, that obviously it's not open-ended. Eventually it's going to end. And
Hmm.
it was a dream. I wanted to be an international rider. I didn't want to be I wanted to be an international rider. I wanted to ride against the best riders in the world so that I could get to know them and get to understand them and learn from them. And there was no way to really do that in magazines or watching television, or
Hmm.
there was no Clip My Horse. Um,
No.
so I didn't want to look back on my experience in this sport and think, wow, I really regret that I didn't take the chances that I needed to take in order to
Mhm.
try to accomplish everything that I could accomplish. And I'm really happy because we've sold the place in France. We've sold the lorries. We're totally out of Europe, and now we're based in Ocala, Florida, and love it. But we're lucky because now when we look back on our experience in this sport, on my experience in this sport, I didn't leave a stone unturned.
Mhm.
Uh, we went all in, and we went as far as I could go, and that horse took me there. And the support that I had from my sponsors took me there, and all of my clients along the way took me there. And from my parents and from my wife, from my family, they enabled all of those people and the horses. Lucky they enabled a dream that I thought I could never accomplish, something I thought I could never accomplish, to happen, and actually to happen in great style, far better than
Mhm.
I had expected.
Love that you relocating to Ocala. Now because of WEC, it really has become a mecca for a lot of international riders to come to. So it's kind of interesting. Now you don't have to go to Europe to ride against the Europeans. And I would imagine as a lifestyle, it's probably nice after having been on the road for so many years. I used to, when I was younger, describe to friends that I thought the horse show world was a little bit like the circus, where they traveled from spot to spot. And I myself was always an amateur. From the outside, I would just go to some of the horse shows, but I thought for professionals, they really were on the road all the time. And so it is really, I'm sure, lovely for you and your wife to be able to go home at the end of the day or the end of a week and know that you can sleep in your own bed and be at your own place. I feel like definitely WEC has become a real game changer for a lot of professionals. And who would have guessed that that's what would come beyond the spectacular venue and the amazing rings and the opportunities. Myself as an amateur, I have to admit, it's such a lovely venue to come to. I've never experienced anything like this in Canada other than Spruce Meadows. I would say Spruce Meadows is for sure right up there. But
Yes.
for you, I imagine, and your wife, it really is probably lovely to be able to stay in one place.
It was the first time in since I was 10 years old. So basically I'd been on the road for, I don't know, 40 years. That's a lot of road. It's a long road.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like Johnny Cash. I've been everywhere. Been everywhere. And my poor wife had to go everywhere with me. When we moved here for the first time in 40 years, I spent a year basically in my own bed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been nice. It's been very nice. But now I have these two amazing horses, and so I'll probably be spending a little less time in my bed.
So you're going to want to travel with these two horses, are you?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how far
Mm.
yet, but they're both amazing horses, and I'm lucky to have one, let alone two. So I'm very happy to have these two horses, and I have others as well that are very, very nice. But these two are the headliners, and I just got the Lion Air, and the Stallion, of course, I've had for, well, it's been 5 years. He's just coming to the international level, so we'll see. But he seems quite exceptional.
And he's 10, is that right?
He's 10, but he's 9. It's kind of complicated. He's from
Okay.
Argentina. Yeah,
Mm.
so he's born in November.
Oh,
So I kind of feel bad saying he's 10
yeah, because
when,
he's really 9.
yeah, exactly. It's like erasing a year of the poor guy's life. But he's 10 in the US, he'd be 9. South of the equator, he's 9. North of the equator, he's 10. So there's some ambiguity there, let's put it that way. He's coming into his own. So I think I'll be traveling a bit more than I had once I moved to Ocala. And I had to stay home a bit too, doing a lot of construction projects and stuff, as you always are when you first move to a place.
The lovely thing is you're still young. You still have an
Really?
entire, you still have an entire, if Ian's anything to judge by, you've got at least another 18 years of showing ahead of you. So who knows where you could be.
No, if I don't, I've never been able to be judged by Ian's standards. His standards are lofty for me. So if I get another decade into the sport, I'm plenty happy.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely fulfilled more. I've done more in the sport than I ever thought I would do. Anything else is just gravy.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I let you go, I did have to give you a nod from Jill Henselwood because I remember speaking with her several months ago, and she was telling me the story of George, who she took to the London Olympics. And I believe she bought George from you, did she not?
Did,
And
yes.
not only that, what she really loved was that you helped her with the Olympic trials. And she still tells the story of you planned for her to ride the round and have a time fault. And she said, really? I've heard her say this story so many times. Really? We're going to ride for a time fault? And you were like, yes, we are. And sure enough, she did qualify for the team. So I just love that you have not only had great success, you've also paid it forward with somebody I know at that level who really appreciated your assistance. And I feel like you do have a reputation for being just a caring, giving soul. And I think that comes across in what you've expressed as far as your interaction with your sponsors and your horses. So I think that's a testimony to your character on a certain level.
Well, thank you so much. Jill bought that horse and made an Olympic athlete out of him. When I sold him, he was, let's just say, rough around the edges. And she really did. She and Bob did an amazing job on that horse. To get it to the Olympic level was quite a feat.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always respected them. I mean, I've respected them no matter what, long before that horse. But I've always respected them for what they were able to accomplish with that horse.
Well, listen, Richard, I really want to say thank you so much for your time and your stories. It was really lovely to have the opportunity to speak with you. And I wish you all the best with your many mounts and look forward to seeing you on the podium.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming guests on the podcast, please follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Horsetails with Cat.